Hi there, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Sarah Peternell. I'm the owner of Family Nutrition Services in Denver, Colorado. Welcome, it's a beautiful day. I'm sitting outside, and I thought I would record a video for you today about how anemia is a pretty big problem for people who have Hashimoto's, and I want to explain why, because gosh, we know so much about so many other of the nutrients that are important to supporting thyroid health and immune system health and total body wellness, but iron plays a very key role. The thing is that for people who suffer with Hashimoto's, there are so many different ways that we can start to change our food plan, we can change our lifestyle, we can take proper supplements, but it can often be very difficult to overcome anemia, okay? So here's the deal. Anemia blocks cells from receiving proper oxygen. Okay, that's pretty important. If cells are not receiving enough oxygen, it's pretty much impossible to make a difference, whether it's with medication, food, lifestyle, or supplements, in your Hashimoto's overall improvement. Anemia is actually a pretty serious condition, and it sets off a chain reaction of symptoms that may also mimic some of those hypothyroid or Hashimoto's symptoms that you might already be experiencing. For example, chest pain or cold extremities, depression, dizziness, lightheadedness, fatigue, muscle weakness, foggy thinking, brain fog, headaches and migraines, heart palpitations, heartbeat changes, and even pale skin, hair, and nail problems as well. So it kind of sounds a lot of like the symptoms that a person might be dealing with if they have Hashimoto's. Now, the problem generally with anemia is that we just assume it's caused by an iron deficiency, but that isn't always the case. So iron is certainly one that we should be thinking about when we're looking at overall health, not just for Hashimoto's, but for general body health. But it doesn't always come down just to iron, and in fact, some people are including iron and they don't need it in their supplement regimen, and that may actually cause a toxic excess, and this can be just as serious of a heavy metal problem in your body as would be lead or mercury, arsenic, or other metals. And so even having too much of a good thing can also further complicate Hashimoto's. There are a couple different types of anemia, and I want to go over those now. Maybe you're someone who has Hashimoto's who's dealt with one of these types of anemia. I have. It's pretty common. So the first is obviously the iron deficiency anemia, which I've really been basically referencing since the start of this video. The deficiency is usually caused by gut issues, right? So the reasons why that we don't absorb iron very well from food and sometimes from supplements is usually due to gastrointestinal issues, malabsorption issues, or other conditions or diseases like celiac disease, Crohn's, colitis, etc. In this case, the gut actually has damage and it's unable to absorb iron. Also, there may be some other types of conditions that are present that cause internal bleeding, things like stomach ulcers, which can be related to having H. pylori. This can also lead to an iron deficiency. Also, many women in perimenopause who have heavy menstrual cycles are also testing low for their total iron levels and also low ferritin. I'll go into that in a little bit more in just a second. So if you're thinking about maybe the ways in which anemia might be causing some of your symptoms and or the types of nutrients that you need to correct it, iron should be one of the first things that you speak to your doctors about, but you should also test for it. Test for it to make sure that it's something that you need. Let's talk about a couple of the other types of anemia. B12. So this is called pernicious anemia, and it's the type of deficiency that results from having basically a diet that is low in B12. And in particular, this would be the individuals who do not consume red meat, for example. They may be lacking in intrinsic factor, which is a stomach compound that helps us to absorb vitamin B12. So there's something called parietal cells, and you can have your doctor check to see if you actually have antibodies to the parietal cells which produce intrinsic factor, in which case this type of pernicious anemia may actually be for you an autoimmune condition, maybe secondary to your Hashimoto's. So we're talking about a B12 deficiency, meaning that there maybe isn't adequate sources of B12 in the diet or from supplementation, or also that there basically is a problem with the parietal cells that produce intrinsic factor, not allowing the body to digest and absorb this really important nutrient. There can be other types of anemia related to other conditions. So basically, I'm not going to go into this too much, but if a body is not using its nutrition properly, including iron, anemia can actually cause basically inflammation in the body, and it can cause areas of infection, areas of inflammation, and basically what we would call sort of these sequestered pockets of iron that are either in the tissues, the organs, or in the bloodstream, but the sources of iron are not being absorbed well into the red blood cells where they're needed. So this is a pretty uncommon type of anemia, but we do actually know about these types of anemia because it would include like sickle cell anemia or hemolytic anemia, aplastic, and also bone marrow diseases that also have anemia as a side effect or a symptom. So one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about, which is ferritin, as kind of the storage. It's a protein that actually contains iron. So if you've had your ferritin tested, it's not really testing kind of like your iron in general. It's actually testing like the storage container that iron would live in. Okay, so it is a great test if you have Hashimoto's, especially if you are dealing with Hashimoto's and have hair loss. Because this protein that contains iron is one of the ways in which our cells store iron. And there is a small amount of ferritin that kind of circulates through the blood. And again, this test can measure that amount. But what it helps us to know is whether or not we're running out of that storage, and there may be some long-term consequences or problems with total iron in the body, iron absorption, and maybe some other issues with iron absorption. So I actually always request my clients to ask their doctor for a ferritin test. There are adequate ferritin, optimal, I should say, ferritin levels that work great for people with Hashimoto's. My computer is running really slow out here, so my notes that I had typed up for this are just running a little bit slow. I apologize for that. So I'll try to remember what I was going to cover about ferritin, but iron deficiency and low ferritin are not the same thing. So that's another really interesting thing, right? You might just get your iron tested, and your doctor may determine, well, no, that looks good. You actually don't have any issues with iron, but you could still have low ferritin. So again, certain things that can lead to low ferritin would be heavy menstrual bleeding, pregnancies and surgeries, and gastritis and certain medications, and also those illnesses which prevent proper absorption like celiac disease. Ferritin is really important for the thyroid. Okay, so if it goes below, typically say 30, but I actually like to err on the side of about 40. If it goes below 40, this would really be considered a deficiency. But for optimal, I think especially if you're trying to regrow hair, right? If you've had hair loss associated with your Hashimoto's, 70 to 75 or even 80 for a level of ferritin is desirable, because that can really help to start to turn back on some of the thyroid functions that are needed along with ferritin. So, oh good, here comes my notes. So there is actually a doctor in Finland who believes that the optimal ferritin for hypothyroid is 100 and above. So that's pretty high, actually. I've been working on my ferritin levels since my heart surgery back in 2018, and I think I'm at like 78, and I feel pretty good about that. I think it would be pretty hard to get above 100, especially if you're menstruating and or, I have celiac disease, so some of those issues can also complicate maybe getting up to that optimal level. That is Dr. Esa Soppi, Soppi. As I said, he's in Finland. He recommends that iron therapy really should be pursued and continued until symptoms are resolved and that the ferritin level is above 100. He also recommends regularly checking ferritin levels about every 4 to 6 months because they can drop pretty quickly. One of the signs that he says is a great indicator of low ferritin is restless leg syndrome. I concur. Personally, from my own experiences, around the time of my heart surgery in 2018, as my ferritin levels were low, I had awful restless leg syndrome. Also, I had trouble sleeping. I was having hair issues. Certainly, I had anemia. I had some red blood cell issues and low total iron as well. So I can concur with his statement that one of the things a person might first notice if they're iron deficient or low ferritin would be restless legs. Okay, so let's see. I wanted to go over a couple of other things that can also be related to the low ferritin, and then also to talk about why it's important. Okay, so if you have, say, subclinical hypothyroidism or you're newly diagnosed with Hashimoto's and you also have some other syndromes like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, maybe you're dealing with a secondary autoimmune condition. I certainly work with some clients who have Lyme's disease or even have recovered from cancer. This is one of the things that these kind of perfect storms of a number of different conditions that can really cause these ferritin deficiencies. So if we know that these conditions exist, then iron supplementation, of course, according to testing, really should be required. But I do think it's helpful just to, speak with your doctor, work with a board-certified holistic nutrition therapist, and as you're doing your intake, all of these types of conditions in a single individual warrant testing for iron, probably supplementing with iron, and definitely eating an iron-rich food plan. That's really, really important. I do have some clients who are vegans or vegetarians. They don't eat red meat. They may be dealing with low ferritin levels. They may be dealing with low iron, especially if they're menstruating women. In these clients, we found it almost impossible to get their ferritin levels up with supplementation alone. So obviously I recognize and very much respect the choice to become a vegan or a vegetarian, but your health is really important. So getting your iron and ferritin levels up so that you can recover and feel good and have energy and, live the life that you want to live healthfully and happily might mean that you need to eat some red meat if you're one of those people who have kind of chronically low iron and low ferritin. Why is iron so important to the thyroid after all? Well, it is actually required for the production of the thyroid hormones T4 and T3, and also more importantly for conversion of T4 into the active T3. And iron is also required for the utilization of T3 inside the cell. So every cell within your body has receptor sites for thyroid hormone. And if there is low iron inside each cell, then it makes it very difficult for that cell to use T3. So low hormone production, low hormone conversion, and then low utilization can all occur. So I think one of the interesting things is that, we can get our blood tests. We can get a TSH, a free T3, a free T4. They can all look normal. But in the face of low iron, it's still impairing the utilization of thyroid hormone, again, at this receptor level. And it kind of creates almost like this false picture that your numbers are normal, because you'll have normal numbers and you won't feel very good, right? So has anybody experienced this? You go to the doctor, they test all of these labs, and he's like, everything looks good, I'm sorry. You're like, oh my God, is it all in my head? Well, it could be the low iron is actually kind of masking some of these things. The levels may look normal, but you're not really utilizing it within the receptor and within the cell. So low ferritin actually can increase TSH over time. And that can actually also be confusing, because what it might not actually be is it may not be a problem with the feedback from the pituitary to the thyroid, but it can actually be low ferritin levels. Low ferritin has been linked to formation of thyroid nodules, thyroid enlargement, thyroid goiter. According to some studies, iron deficiency has been shown to decrease the effectiveness of iodine that needs to get to the thyroid. And we all know how important iodine is. You can watch my other video about that if you would like. So in order to prevent these types of, inflammation, enlargements, goiter, nodules, etc., iron and ferritin levels should be checked through testing. And then also adequate iron and iodine supplementation should be pursued. Okay, let's see. All right, do you have maybe any issues with your liver? Well, many of us don't really think about our liver until we maybe get some lab scores back that are showing maybe some elevated liver enzymes that would warrant some more testing for the liver. But your liver health must be in tip-top shape as well in order for the utilization of iron, where a lot of this thyroid hormone conversion takes place. So a lot of what our liver's job is to make sure that our T4 is being converted into T3. And so even if you have adequate iron and you're doing all the things right, if you're having any liver kind of compromises, maybe too many glasses of wine, maybe some chemical exposure, maybe heavy metals, maybe viral pathogens, maybe fatty liver from eating a standard American diet, or too many refined carbs, refined oils, and refined sugars for too long before you started to watch my channel and start eating more of a health supportive diet, that too can also lead to some of these liver complications. So I just wanted to point out, that how intricately connected all of these issues are. It's not just the TSH test. It's not just T4. It's not just free T3. We really need to be looking at the nutritional relationships between some of the most important minerals in our thyroid health, as well as our overall health. So on your checklist for the next time you visit your doctor, asking for a ferritin test would be a great place to start. You can also ask for some of the iron panels, including the total iron, saturation, iron binding capacity. Those are really just kind of the tip of the iceberg. We also need to have you get probably a CMP, which is going to be a complete metabolic panel. Check out those liver enzymes, making sure that everything looks good and healthy. Get your CBC so you know how many red blood cells you have in your body, and also if your hemoglobin looks normal and your hematocrit are also looking normal. Then we can kind of start to rule out some things. Ask your doctor for a B12 test. Maybe get one of those tests for the antibodies against the parietal cells to see if you're having trouble with intrinsic factor and preventing the absorption of B12, causing pernicious anemia. The best way to do all of this is to work with someone like me. You can visit my website at sarahpeternell.com and click on Book a Free Appointment. Or back on the homepage of my YouTube channel, you can click on Book a Free Appointment. If you want to schedule a consultation with me so you can find out how we can work together, please do. I can help you with all of these labs. I can help you better understand the role of iron, the role of iodine if you need it, if you need to supplement. We can do standard lab testing, we can do functional testing, we can do nutritional testing, and we can get you on a path to feeling better very soon, I promise. Thank you so much for watching today's video all about the importance of iron and the problems with anemia if you have Hashimoto's. I'll be back soon with more videos. Have a great weekend. I'll see you soon.